Have you ever had one of those moments of intense loss? A moment when you realize that your life has changed forever. Maybe the loss of a loved one, the loss of a job, going bankrupt. It could be a diagnosis of a terminal disease for you or a loved one. The feelings of fear, desperation, sadness, devastation. The word that describes it is utterly gutted. It is often these moments that we might be told it is God's will. Leave it to God, have faith, and. A book that examines the state of utter despair and loss is a book written by Harold Kushner, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Harold Kushner was a rabbi, a leader and teacher in the Jewish faith. He was a clever man who took his calling seriously. Rabbi Kushner and his wife noticed certain developmental systems in their baby son that had them deeply concerned. Instead of growing at a steady and healthy pace, he seemed to be slowing down. He was getting smaller and smaller compared to his peers, and he was not the robust little boy that they had expected. As concerned parents, they took the child to specialists where it could be properly evaluated and diagnosed. It was after a tense period of uncertainty that they were given the crushing news that their son had progeria. Progeria is an aging disorder. Children with this disorder seldom live beyond their early teens. Parents will have to suffer the pain of watching their child grow old, rather than thrive and grow up. They will witness their child develop wrinkled skin, arthritis, heart disease. They will look like wizened, bent old men or women by the age of 10 years old. Harold Kushner had this moment of numbing pain, one in which he felt completely abandoned by God. As a rabbi, he had entered into a deeper understanding of his faith. He started to become aware that faith was not so much a matter of the mind, but a matter of the heart. He swore that suffering was everywhere. Why was it that good so often suffered at the hands of those seemingly indifferent to their actions? Why was it that good people suffered? This was not the law of cause and effect. During this period, Harold Kushner was also dealing with Holocaust survivors, those who had gone through so much, seen so much evil, and often lost everything, including family. His previous knowledge suddenly seemed inadequate in the face of so much suffering of the innocent. After his son's death and the agonizing loss he went through with his wife, he wrote his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. It is rich and full of wisdom. It is written by a man who had survived the most devastating loss, and a man who is called to be a religious leader of his people. Yet had he struggled, not through intellect, but through the deepest suffering anyone could experience, the loss of a child. In Harold Kushner's words, he had recognized that God does not will suffering. He does not punish the bad and reward the good. The force of God's presence is experienced by how we respond to the suffering around us. Harold Kushner said, "The purpose in life is not to win. The purpose in life is to grow and share. When you look back on all you have done in life, you will get more satisfaction from the pleasure you have brought into other people's lives than you will from the times that you outdid and defeated them." The experience of losing a child slowly left him aware that words are often enough. It is the compassion he experienced from those around him that carried him and his wife through their suffering. His central message is one of love and caring, even through the darkest moments of losing a child. In the words of Harold Kushner, if you have been brave enough to love, sometimes you won and sometimes you lost. If you have cared enough to try, and sometimes it works and sometimes it didn't. If you have been bold enough to dream, and found yourself with some dreams that came true, and a lot of broken pieces of dreams that didn't, that fell to earth and shattered, then you can look back from the mountaintop you now found yourself standing on, like Moses contemplating the tablets that would guide human behavior for a millennia, resting in the ark alongside the broken fragments of an earlier dream. And you, like Moses, can realize how full your life has been and how richly you are blessed. I remember when my children were young, we were living in a suburb with children of similar ages. It was a newly growing development that was designed to encourage community living. There were few walls and lots of parks. We would meet and greet mainly at the park. One day, the word went around that one of our community members had a desperately ill little girl. The parents had been alarmed at a fever that would not come down, a bad headache, and the little girl soon relapsed into a state of unconsciousness. The grapevine sprung into action. It was one of concern. Even those who did not know the family in need understood what it meant to have a sick child who might die. There were frequent updates on her progress from those closest to the family. We were told she had meningococcal meningitis and was not expected to live. Meningococcal meningitis has a high mortality rate and it kills quickly. It is the meningitis most feared by doctors. The community became one. Everyone saw themselves in the suffering of these parents. It was not their child that was about to die. It was a child that belonged to each one of us. Everyone did something. Those cooked meals, some offered to babysit, those who could pray prayed. This was before the days of social media, but we were all connected through mutual concern and empathy. Much to everyone's relief, this little girl lived. But something extraordinary had happened in our community. There were no more strangers. For me, it was an experience that still remains deeply etched. There was never a sense that the suffering was at any point God's will. That was something inflicted on the parents or child. Why then do we use it in other areas of our understanding of God and life? Perhaps suffering is not God's will, but the way we respond about the indifference or love. We have no control over suffering. Those who are closest to us will die. Sometimes we might be faced with unimaginable loss. The first thing to get out of our minds that it is some way punishment from God. The core of our faith is love. The deepest attribute that reflects God's love on earth is empathy. It is vital that deep suffering should never be alone. Perhaps we need to reflect and say, God's voice is heard in the caring. God's voice is heard in those who rush in to help. My name is Wendy Hay. I'm a clinical psychologist. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I will do some more.